Welcome. I mean, welcome. And apparently, there are a number of you here who, some of you whom I know, and probably many of you whom know Jodi and Jodi knows. And welcome to this Alumni Weekend evening with Jodi Long. I'm Chris McCann. I'm presently the chair of the acting program, which some of you graduated from some many years ago. And Jodi and I, know each other because of the same way you know Jodi. I mean, although I am not an alumni of Purchase, I am I know of you guys from that first graduating class. And if there are others, I imagine there are some alumni who are here from different years. You are welcome as well. But it was fun to see some familiar faces there. So Jodi Long, I'm gonna just read if I can get my cursor in place. Oh well, let me just we're gonna if you have questions for Jodi, you can put them in the chat. We're also gonna try to if there's a question that generates a conversation with you all, that would be great, and we can have just a conversation. We don't have to have a formal, you put in a question, we read it, and then Jodi responds to it. We can have a more free-flowing kind of conversation. That would be great. If it doesn't work out that way and we're just reading questions, that would be great too. No problem. But if you have questions that you may put them in the chat, and we'll call on you later. What else do I need, Tracy? What else do I need to tell them? I think that's it. Um,
Maybe just a little introduction of Jodi, if for those who don't know
all
Jodi.
right. Well, I'm yes. um, Jodi was a member of the first graduating class of Purchase. She has
Graduating acting class.
the first graduating acting class from the right. That's right. The alumni weekend is for people other than from the graduating acting class. You're right. And she made her Broadway debut at 7 years old, folks, working with Sidney Lumet. She has 5 Broadway shows under her belt, which include Flower Drum Song. Um, uh, she has films which include Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings, Beginners, Patty Hearst, Sour Tweet, The Hot Chick, a number of TV regulars, uh, Dash and Lily, Sullivan and Son, Margaret Cho's mother in All American Girl, Cafe American, Falling Water. And then at some point, and this is going to be our focus tonight. At some point, she created an award-winning documentary called Long Story Short. And I don't know this specifically, but I'm assuming that Surfing My DNA generated from Long Story Short. Am I right, Jodi?
Actually, Surfing DNA was written before Long Story Short. And
Wow.
yeah, I had my first workshop before the movie. And then a friend was doing interviews with my parents while I was doing Flower Drum Song. She wanted to do a documentary on my family. And she kind of took off and then left it because she ran out of money and gave it to me.
Wow.
I raised some money. I got Christine Choi to come on, and Oscar nominated director for She Killed Vincent Chen, which is very timely and topical right now. And together we raised money and put that together. So that actually got out to the public before my play did.
Wow. Fabulous. My where I want to start is where the impulse where to create, generate, write this piece first was born.
I think it was mainly because there were so many stories in my family's history that I felt if I didn't put them down, they'd be lost. And because, well, people on the Zoom will find out that my parents were vaudevillians and were on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1950. And that's part of the journey in the play, whereas which I used to think they were just so corny, they were show business people. And I was like, oh my God, they're so embarrassing. And when I had to research the Flower Drum Song, because they used to play in the same nightclubs that Flower Drum Song takes place in, that I actually went and found the Ed Sullivan Show and showed it to them, because Ed Sullivan was live. It was a live television, sorry, my cats, a live television program. So and there was no VCRs in 1950. So they never saw themselves perform on the Ed Sullivan Show. They never saw themselves
Oh my gosh.
at all. So I found the tape. I mean, that's partly in the show. And
Yeah.
It's really what was in the documentary. And
Oh, there must be a story there of finding that tape.
big story, yeah. And so they finally got to reconcile their experience, what they thought their experience was of doing the Ed Sullivan Show at that time, to actually seeing themselves more than 50 years. Yeah, 50 years later. It's 50 years later. So that was it was really good for them, but it was also good for me, because I finally had to acknowledge all the influence they had on me, as performers and showbiz people. And that's what they were. I mean, that was not what I learned at Purchase. I learned to be a classical actress.
Yeah.
And my mother kept telling me, you really got to put false eyelashes on when you go to this. I was like, what? Mom, it's 5 easy pieces and
Right.
Easy Rider. That's what I was looking at. I was like, nobody wears false eyelashes. So that was really it. But it's more than just their story, Surfing DNA. It's really about imprints, and the imprints that affect us. So it's not just our DNA, which definitely affects us, but it's the emotional imprints that our parents leave on us or give us. And it's also the societal imprints that are coming at us fast and furious, whether you're a woman or you're Asian American or, you're African American or whatever, you're Polish, it doesn't matter, right? We all have those imprints. And so discovering what those were through my travels as an actor, in part, right? I got to travel the world like twice over within 2 years. And I landed in these places where I don't think I would have ever really connected to being Chinese, or my dad's partly Australian, he's Chinese Australian. And then, but he's also Scottish. So I got to, and my mom's Japanese American. And so all those influences start bubbling up at some point if you start to really listen to them or be interested. And that's what happened. And that's been partly my journey to, in a way, reclaim myself, because I was just a girl from Queens, who watched I Love Lucy. That was my growing up. And wanted to play guitar like Joni Mitchell. So, that was my reference. And then to broaden that and come to some kind of terms with it, which was a good thing.
I mean, we should take a look at this little video which you made for the New Jersey Shakespeare Festival.
Well, I actually made it. This is interesting. I made it for theaters around the country during COVID. Dan Loria, who played my Sullivan and Son, he loves theater. He loves supporting theater, and he got all his really good friends to do a 5-minute read of something they wrote. And so Tony Shalhoub did it, and Alfred Molina, and Bryan Cranston, Wendy Malick, great people, right? And he put this together, and this was one of the first ones to go out. And so we're going to see it from the New Jersey Rep website, but it's also on the Denver Theater Centers. All of
Yeah, it was part of a support theater during COVID times event. Great. And Stacy, maybe we could show that now.
Hi, I'm Jodi Long. I wrote a one-person show called Surfing DNA, and today I'm read an excerpt from it. In the schoolyard as a child, there was a joke I was often told. Chinese eyes, eyes slanted one way. Japanese eyes, eyes slanted the other way. What happens when a Chinese person marries a Japanese person? They have a baby that looks like this, eyes slanted in opposite directions. Growing up in Queens, New York, kids ran away from me screaming with laughter. I was silent. The fact was, I really was Chinese and Japanese. I never told anyone because I didn't want them to think I was supposed to have two eyes that were different. I mean, it was bad enough being Chinky or Jap, but both? Other kids were just one thing: Italian, Irish, Greek, or Jewish. Visions of children in the schoolyard taunting me with their eyes like this plagued me to be silent. The truth was, my parents really did have different kind of eyes. My mother has small almond, no epicanthian fold to her Japanese eyes. My father, being Chinese, has larger eyes with an epicanthian fold. My eyes are like my father's. I was secretly happy about that, for my father's eyes were more like everyone else's eyes, meaning everyone else who wasn't Asian. Still, I was always wary that this playground joke would prove itself true. Daily, I would stand at the bathroom mirror and breathe a sigh of relief to see two epicanthian folds sitting atop my Asian-looking eyes. My parents were vaudevillians. They met at the China Doll nightclub in New York City. My mother, a showgirl. My father, a tap dancer. After they married, my father created their own variety act, Larry and Trudy Leong. They played the nightclubs in and around the tri-state area. They played the chop suey circuit, Asian-themed nightclubs in San Francisco that catered to a glamorous Asian and non-Asian crowd. The Asian American version of the Borscht Belt. They played the Palace, my father exchanging tap routines with Sammy Davis Jr. And one time, they even played the Ed Sullivan Show.
And now from China.
My mother was 5 months pregnant before she realized I was the reason she was bursting the seams of her costume. 9 months in the womb, bobbing around to my parents, singing, dancing, telling jokes. It was a wonder I didn't come out doing a soft shoe. My first recollection are of my mother's long hair piled high on top of her head in a huge bun. My father's tuxedo bow tie dangling by my face as he carried me home from the nightclubs half asleep. The smell of grease paint and the flutter of false eyelashes as my mother kissed me goodnight, tucking me in. The rustle and swish of taffeta as she exited the room. Oh, how beautiful she looked in the sequin gowns she made for herself. On her one evening off when I was asleep, she would sew and bead long into the night, and in the morning a new gown would magically appear on her personal form-fitted mannequin. Layers and layers of tulle netting under taffeta, diadems of bugle beads dripping dewdrops of light, sequins shimmering on gowns that years later my mother ended up throwing out. Thrown out. Like all the kimonos my mother's family threw out when they could only take what they could carry, when they were shipped off to American internment camps during World War II, even though they were American citizens. Thrown out. Where are all those kimonos? The white and gold one my mother graduated Portland High School in, the one my grandmother made, the gowns my mother sewed, The purple, the green one, the black net lace one with pink mauve taffeta underneath. Where are they now? I see kimonos in antique stores and fantasize they are my mother's. I see Ginger Rogers-style dresses and wonder, where are my mother's? The fabric of my life, sewn by the women of my life, thrown away. If I could only find them
now. That's fabulous. It's they're so, they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful. When you were surfing, right? When you were like checking this out, how far back did you go? I mean, this story seems to be kind of about you and your mom and dad getting, reconnecting with those roots. But did you go further back?
Yeah, in the show, yes.
Yeah. Well, but yes, yeah, or not in the show. Just what was your journey of discovery?
Well, I found out that my father's family, they're Australian.
I know. Ed Sullivan says from China, but
from China. Right. And you don't see the Ed Sullivan show now, but they had to do what they had to do, right?
Sure.
So accepted, they came out in sort of Chinese gowns, even though my father didn't even speak Chinese. And so he speaks sort of fake Chinese and does that. And then they take those gowns off, and he's got a tuxedo on and she's got on a Ginger Rogers style dress. So they just break it right there, right on television, which I think is fantastic. But I go back to my great grandmother, who was from Scotland and ends up marrying or running away with a Chinese man from China.
Wow.
Who's in Australia. Yeah. But they go back to China to get married. And I didn't know that. I found that out much later. I knew about her, but I never realized how, she was 19, he was 47. And
wow.
And like in the late 1800s. So how scandalous was that? And so my family in Australia, they're very mixed all over the place. And then my mother's family, I found out when one of my uncles died that I kind of knew that we were samurai. That's what we were told. And then I found out that we were sword makers, my family. So I started to investigate that because that seemed so interesting to me, because I was actually doing Tai Chi sword.
Mm-hmm.
That was a different kind of sword. I just thought it was so interesting to me. And then my uncle at that time gave me our koseki, which is the Japanese.
Gave you a
koseki, called koseki, and it's the official family register in Japan. It's all in Japanese. And so he gave me a copy of it. And of course, I couldn't read it. Nobody could read it in my family. Nobody read or spoke Japanese because they were all put in an internment camp. And that was the worst thing you could do, was to speak Japanese once you got out, because you didn't want to be put back in. So my mother got out of the internment camp by a lot of moxie. She was only 19. And she came to New York and got a job as a clerk or, whatever. And then got a job in the China Doll nightclub in New York, because she looked good and she didn't know how to do anything, but she got a job there. So that was sort of her trajectory into show business, because that was, she made $75 a week by putting on, being a pony, what they called a pony. She didn't really dance. She just looked good. And that's where she met my dad. So, but going back to
what year would that have been?
That they were in New York?
Yeah.
I think my mom got out, so they got into the internment camps after Pearl Harbor. And so she was there for maybe a year a little over a year. And she got out and didn't know anybody. All her left all her family in the internment camp and came to New York City.
Wow.
And then got a job at the China Doll nightclub about, I don't know, 8 months later, because she was making $12 a week working as a clerk at the American Bible Society.
So $75 a week was
Huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk us through how, where the process to get this produced began and no,
it's always a journey.
I know.
This started, actually, I think the first reading was at the Taper, and Gordon Davis.
Which is kind of, that's extraordinary. I mean, it sounds like, we did a reading at the Taper, but to get a reading done at the Taper, that shows something.
Well, I had just finished Flower Drum Song there, and
right.
It was about to go to New York, so they knew me. And
there you go.
And so I did a reading, and then I did a workshop, and then, believe it or not, George Wolfe picked it up.
Really?
And they gave me a workshop. And then New York Theater Workshop gave me a workshop. And this was all like within a year after Flower Drum Song was over, a year or so. And the crazy thing was Gordon Davidson retired, George Wolfe retired. Like my entry into doing it at one of those theaters was gone because everybody who took over wanted to do their own thing.
Sure.
So East West Players actually picked it up, and I did it there in 2006. The version I'm doing now is very different. And I did another version at some point. It just seems, now my parents are dead,
yeah,
I can be more forthcoming about the issues that they had. And I think it's just, as you get older, you have more wisdom, hopefully, and have more to share about your experience. So I think it's always evolving, like DNA. It's evolving as the show goes on.
May I ask, how long ago did your parents die?
My mom died 6 years ago, and my dad died about 14 years ago.
And was that, after your mom died, did that then propel you in some way? Did that nourish your desire to have this, become corporal?
Yeah. I think each incarnation, life happens, right? You have a project, and then life happens. And my father died, my stepmother died, and my mother died. I got a divorce in the middle of all that. And then I got a television series. So you can't be producing your own show when you're in the middle of doing all these shows and all these other things. So it happened. Dan Loria said, Jodi's got this great show. He gave it to somebody, and then New Jersey Rep picked it up. And now Cooper Union is actually going to do.
And this is what you're going to do this year, right?
I'm coming into New York on Saturday.
On Saturday, my gosh. All right. So this is good timing. This Alumni Weekend. we were going to try to give you a space last spring at Purchase to do this. And of course, the best laid plans of mice and men. It did not happen. COVID happened instead. But it's great that you're coming into Cooper Union. And when exactly is that?
We're live streaming on June 9th, which I believe is a Wednesday. I think it's at 7:30. I can share this with the Alumni Association at some point when I get more firm details. But it was interesting because we're doing it. They have a program called Live from the Great Hall. And the Great Hall, if anyone knows Cooper Union, is where Abraham Lincoln did one of his most famous speeches before he was elected, and Susan B. Anthony, and yet all these great thinkers of the 20th century, I suppose. And so they're doing this thing, and it actually aired on PBS, their first one. So this is their first show back from COVID. And yeah, so I'm actually excited.
Yeah. And how has it changed much? I mean, have you over the years, because this has been with you for quite some time, has your relationship to it changed, and have you gone back into it and altered it
Yes.
in little ways, big ways, anyways?
I've become a better writer. And it's true, but I think it's also because I wanted to frame it in a different way.
How
so? A lot
so?
of stories are the same. Well, I think just the last, I'm not even talking, I just think the last 4 years of the last administration created a lot of real looking at what it means to be an American. And there's a great quote. The show starts with this quote by Eddie Foy Sr., who was the father of vaudeville. And it's, "No one invited you into this business. You invited yourself." That was about people who were going into show business. And in those days, in the early 1900s, the Irish, right, were, sort of like the low man on the totem pole in New York City anyway. And to make money, they went into show business. They could sing and dance, maybe do a little clog dancing, I don't know, and do some jokes and make money. And I think that it was the same thing with my parents. My father learned how to tap dance in Sydney, Australia, taught by a black man, right, who was American, taught him to tap dance.
Wow.
And he went from, making no money, putting radio parts in transistors, to working on stage in the music halls of Sydney. And all of a sudden he was like the only Asian kid on the stage. He was a kid and he could tap dance. So traditionally, it's vaudeville was a way to make money if you had a little bit of talent and a lot of moxie, right?
Yeah.
A lot of guts. and that's not untrue today.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great. That's what a fabulous heritage, and to have and to be in touch with, and to have the generosity to share it with us. What is it like to? I mean, how often have you had the chance to be in front of a live audience with it?
A live audience?
Yeah.
Well, I've done a whole production at East West Players.
Mm-hmm.
That was a different show. And then I did it in Hollywood. I think we did 3 weekends or 3 5-day shows, 5 show weeks. And then I did it in New Jersey Rep in 2019 in May, just at this time, 2 years ago. And that actually was very interesting because that was not a showbiz community. It was just Jerseyites. But I grew up in the Jersey Shore in Bradley Beach, which is couple of towns away from Long Branch, which is where New Jersey Rep is. And those people really, because there is a part in the show where I surf. I learned to surf, and which is not unlike timing, comedy timing. It's all about timing. If you're going to catch that wave, you can't do it unless you have good time. So that was really great. And my goal, I really want to bring it into New York City, which I will at Cooper Union, but I'd like to do it in front of an audience,
Right.
than just once. And I'd really like to bring it to Berkeley Rep because they have a huge Asian American community there. And in part, this takes place in San Francisco, where my parents played in the nightclubs there. So I'd like to take it into towns that have a connection to it.
Yeah.
Oh, just one more thing. So the first act, and it's not going to be in 2 acts when we do it for Cooper Union, because we can sit for 2 acts when it's live streamed, right? But the second act starts with "No one invited you into this country."
I'm sorry, say again.
No
My
one.
my hearing here is.
Sorry. The second act starts with "No one invited you into this country."
Yeah.
You invited yourself, which I think is probably true for almost everyone who showed up here.
Mm-hmm.
So in part, it's about that.
That's fabulous, Jodi. All right. So, do we have any questions? Would we like to open this conversation up to you all who are here? Somebody, just a little. This is the reviews are coming in. What a cute kid you were, Jodi. And can we ask Jodi about the years when you were at Purchase together? What things were formative?
Well, what things were formative? As an actor, I think, Chris and I were talking about this last night.
We were.
I think that, there was a point when I wasn't getting cast. I was getting cast as like the first program we did here. I played the hooker at the beginning of the show. Pat, do you remember that? And then I started getting really tired of just doing these roles that I felt like I had more. And Kathy Hurd and Elmore and there's a couple of other of us, we produced our own cycle of plays in what was that theater? In the theater in the Humanities building?
Oh, in the Humanities building, the theater is the CMFT.
Oh,
But that didn't. The Humanities
Auditorium
CMFT didn't exist then.
the auditorium. Yeah, we put on a thing. And I remember, I was producing then. I went to my roommate, who was like the head of the women's organization. I said, "Do you think I could get some money from you so we could put this on?" And she goes, "Well, we'll give you a bake sale." I was like, "Great." And so we raised $100 or whatever it was, and we put on. We were industrious. And a bunch of us did roles that we were not getting cast in. I did Old Times with Herb Mendelsohn, and I can't remember, I think it was Kathy was in that. And we did Calm Down Mother. We did a bunch of plays, So it was, and after that, it was like I took the initiative in my own hands. Then I started getting cast. Then I got cast as Pirate Jenny and Three Penny Opera and everything. But we had guest directors, and with the exception of Alan Schneider, no one really did. They were like, "Well, I don't know what we're gonna do with you." But that's the way I felt it was. And what I was telling Chris, and I'll just share this now. I can, because it's been a long time.
It's been a long time.
A long time. Nori Houghton was the dean of the drama department at the time, and was, brought in our company with Joseph Anthony, and they were great. And then they left, and Joseph Stockdale came in, and he came from Purdue. He was an academic, really, even though he was running the drama department. And we all had our senior meeting before we were graduating. And he sat me down and he said, "Honey, stick to commercials and modeling, because there's really no place for you in the American theater." This is as I'm a senior and I'm graduating. And I really wanted to say, "I'm sorry, what was I just doing here for 4 years?" But I was too nice to say anything. And I just sort of looked at him and I was like, uh-huh. And honestly, I think people telling me what I couldn't do, I had to prove them wrong. And I think that in a way, I took that, and instead of being crushed by it, I just like, really? And that's actually in my show. this little scene with him. And I am determined to not take that as what was going to determine my life. I had to go do it myself. So that's what I did. And that happened at many different junctures within my career. And I don't know, I was saying to Chris, I mean, I'm still here, I'm still working. And who the fuck ever thought, pardon my French, whoever thought that would ever be? I didn't think that at this age. And I'm really grateful, but it also was, I just didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah. Felicia, you have a question.
Yes, first of all, Jodi, I graduated in 1980, so we never met, but thank you very much. This is, it's been wonderful. I just was, wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more, if you can, about the so-called chop suey circuit, and when did it end, and what did your parents do after that?
The chop suey circuit, that actually wasn't a name that they called themselves then. Like my parents would say, oh, nobody called it that then, right? That became a moniker, like the Borscht Belt, even though people called the Borscht Belt at that time. It was just, it gave people a context that there were nightclubs in San Francisco that were Asian-themed nightclubs. Most of them were run by non-Asian people. The Forbidden City, where my parents played, and where my father first landed when he got to San Francisco, was owned by a Chinese American man, and everyone there. And there was I think 3 other clubs, the Kubla Khan, and I'm blanking right now. There was like 3 other clubs, but they were not run by Chinese Americans. And this club was, and my parents played there a lot. They started probably in the 40s, like I think it was before the war, quite before the war, right around that time. And so there were those clubs, and then there was the China Doll in New York, which is where my mother landed. And then my father was part of a dance team called the Wing Brothers, sort of like the Nicholas Brothers. And they came to the China Doll and did a gig there, or, they usually did a month there or whatever. And that's when he met my mom. And then he and my mom went on to create their own act. And so they would actually play some of the Borscht Belt clubs or whatever, but they were also in the tri-state area, there were a lot of nightclubs. And this is, so you're talking the 50s. So Ed Sullivan, really, they were on in the very beginning of Ed Sullivan. I mean, if you remember, there would be maybe one television set on the block, right? And everybody would go to those people's house. At least it was in Queens where we were. We didn't have a television set. So at that time, when I was really young. So people would go watch that. So now with the advent of television coming in, people started slowly not going out to nightclubs as much. And the nightclubs started weaning out. So I think the Forbidden City, I think it finally ended, because I was there when I was 4, and I think it finally ended a couple of years later, like in 1961, something like that, 61. And the China Doll was run by the Mafia in New York, and that closed way before that. I don't know when that closed. So those were the chop suey circuit, even though they didn't call themselves that at the time.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no questions.
Jan Bromberg had to leave, but he said thank you, Jodi, and he wanted to be a techie in '74. Was also told, as a woman, forget it. Oh, Jan is a woman. There you go. Forget it. Maybe you can do props or costumes. Purchase made the 2 of you fight for what you wanted.
Adversity, people think adversity is a bad thing. It can be. Let it.
Yeah. So, Tracy has a kind of interesting question, which is that she would want to know how the film program, which was, back in those days, the film and the acting program were tied closer together than they are now. And she's wondering if what your connection with the film program, or what influence the film program, film department had with you.
I had no connection to the film department. No, I'm being serious. I think there were other people who did do films with the filmmakers that were there. I don't remember. I'm sure there were. It was not in my purview. I was, you have to understand, when I was coming into the theater, even television was something that was like a little bit looked down upon, right? You were going to be an actor, you were going to be a theater actor, and you're going to make it that way and then go into films. But I really didn't do any films to purchase. So I don't have any. I mean, I know some of the filmmakers later, or remember seeing them on campus, but I never really interacted with them.
Well, back in the day, I mean, in order to, back in the day, New York actors, when they went to LA, when they finally made that journey to LA, they had a lot of clout because they were New York actors. And it's a different story now, folks. With a connection in film, the film has become where, like our students now, their gauge is film and TV. Whereas back when we were going to school, it was theater was the calling card. Anybody have any
iPhones to like film ourselves? So the first time I ever saw myself on film, which was, I was like horrified. Now everyone just taking selfies and it's a whole different world.
It's a whole different world. There's the young people are very, very comfortable, have no qualms about it at all.
I see some questions here. I don't know. Can you read them? Do you have any thoughts?
Kathleen, Bob Cahan says that the theater and film were two different buildings. Kathleen, do you want to ask
Jodi,
your question?
Yeah, sure. So I just was curious to know from your perspective about, the racial profiling that's going on right now with, I mean, it's just these, attacks that are occurring just so randomly. And it's so shocking that it's going on in New York City. I just can't believe it. But do you have any thoughts about that from the perspective you've given us about your family and, what was occurring back in the 40s in our country with, a lot of the prejudice that occurred against Japanese peoples? It's such a bizarre thing that's going on. And I was just curious to know what you've been thinking about it.
Well, it's horrifying to me. I was literally walking my dog on a path where I always walk the dog, and usually there's a lot of people there, but there wasn't anybody there. One day I went there at 3:30, and I had my hat on, my sunglasses on, and I took my mask off because there was nobody around. I thought, and I saw a guy walking on the path through the bushes, and he was by himself. And for the first time in my life, I thought, I better put my mask on just in case he's having a problem with Asian people right now. Because if he attacks me, there's nobody here. Now, for me, I'm a New Yorker, right? Nothing phases me. And I thought, wow, I can't believe I'm thinking this way. So that's a reality. And I've had friends that in Los Angeles who were driving, a beautiful actress that I know, Asian, and she was at a stop sign and somebody spit at her
spit at her, not because she was trying to run them over or anything, she was stopped. And another Asian actress, somebody started running after her. So, I mean, this is real. However, yes, and I do believe it was started with the guy who said the Kung flu and took a bad situation and made it worse. But this is racism, the racism that Asian American people experience. We've been experiencing it for years. And it's usually slightly sideways, right? It's not like punch you in the face, this is racist. It's a slide, because it's an unconscious bias. And so, and Asian people just kind of, whatever. The fact that people are being attacked now, I think, even though I hate it and wish this not happened, I think it's bringing this to the forefront, to the place it needs to be, so that we have a conversation. We start to see it as a nation. It's not just Black people being discriminated against, even though they're getting killed in record numbers, which they were doing 200 years ago, right? But nobody had a camera about it. But this is so steep in our culture. And now it's time to shed some light on it. I do really feel that it is to do that. Unfortunate. I have thought about getting red pigtails to put underneath my hat. I'm
Oh
laughing.
God, I thought you were going to say you're thinking of getting the gun.
No.
I have a friend that who's Asian, he's Chinese. He has a body cam. He lives in Stuytown, and he bought a body cam. You know.
Oh, I know. A lot of friends are telling me to get some mace or get some bear spray, and I just really feel that, what if they grab it and they use it on me?
Oh, that's right. That's the
Then what?
problem.
So I'm just gonna try and be alert. And
Thank you so much. I know it's painful to talk about it, but I was curious about what you thought.
it's perfectly fine. We need to talk about things that are happening. It's important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jodi, I think the price of bear spray is down since all the trials with the guys at DC. You know, I just thought I'd throw that in. That's not true.
Thanks, I appreciate that. I saw another question in the chat, where it is. Do you think theater will embrace more new media? Who's this? Lisan? Such as, what's VR?
Virtual reality.
Oh, virtual reality.
So a lot of documentary filmmakers are using the medium to expand their story narrative. And there was an Asian piece in Cannes, Stay Alive, My Son, that was taken off of a short story that they had presented in a VR space. And so I'm curious if you're seeing more theatrical pieces using that medium as an additional platform for audience experiences, for accessibility to those who can't necessarily go into a theater.
Virtual reality, I don't know so much about that. I mean, I do think that with COVID and people really wanting some kind of theatrical experience in their life, I think that these live streams, or a lot, and the public is showing a lot of things now online. So I think that, I don't know how, I mean, my show, if I had the money, I would have a lot, I wouldn't say virtual reality, but I would have a lot of medium. You know, I did a show years ago with Philip Glass called 1,000 Airplanes on the Roof. Sorry, my phone. And it was Philip Glass music. David Henry Wong wrote the script. It was 30-page monologue. And we had these sets by Jerry Serlin. It was about alien abduction. So I love having this kind of media behind me. And if in a perfect world, when we get to do surfing on a bigger stage and a bigger budget, there's going to have a lot of media in it.
I mean, it does already, but that's what I'm really hoping for. So we'll see if we get to it. I like immersive experiences for audience. I think giving the audience an experience is the key. And it's not just them watching. It's like, how is this pertain to me? That's really fun.
When you've done your show, Jodi, have you had feedback, direct feedback with the audience? Do you talk to them during the show? Do you talk?
I have spoken to them, in talkbacks afterwards or after the show when they stay around and say hello. I think that for me, this show, at the end of the show, I tell everyone to go. Well, I don't tell everybody, but I just say, let's surf. And it's really about going into your own DNA and what that brings up for you. And my story is very specific to my story and my family's story. But we all have those stories. And how are we imprinted by them? How do these people affect us in good ways and in bad ways? And those are the things that we have to embrace, all of it. Like this country means to our America, right? United States. We are a great experiment of democracy. And yet we have our issues as well. And we can't really, until we acknowledge all of that, can we move forward. That's the way I feel. I mean, I feel that way about myself as a person, but I also feel that way about the bigger picture of our society and stuff. So my hope is that people just think about, wow, where do I come from? And what DNA am I serving? Imprints in so many ways.
Yeah. It's a great and hopeful thought. Okay. If
Oh, I see another question here. What is, do we have any? I don't know what that is. Steve Kushner, would you like to discuss your union involvement? Oh God, and the issues you encounter. Okay, I'm just going to say, would you have any advice for acting students of today? Okay, I'm going to answer these really quickly. Yeah, I do a lot of, I'm a national board member at SAG-AFTRA.
I have to ask you, Jodi, where are these? I'm not seeing these.
What? It's on the chat. It's in the chat. Well, let me answer quickly because I think we have 4 minutes left. I think what have I done? So I was the chair of the EEOC at SAG-AFTRA. And one of my most proud moments, I had gone to a casting session, a casting workshop that had the Obama STEM, when Obama was still in office, STEM people. And it was about, women and engineering and science and how do we bring this forth? And, you can't be what you can't see. So how does the industry do that? Casting, blah, blah, blah. Well, I was exposed, so this is like 7 years ago, to an unconscious bias workshop by an amazing, fantastic woman who started at Google, and now she's the head of diversity at Disney. And I was so jazzed by this. I got SAG through the EEOC. We produced one of the first unconscious bias workshops for the Producers Guild at their Produced By, conference at Sony Studio. And I got the head of the Academy Motion Picture Academy to go, and just a lot of different people. And I said, this is where we need to be. And, who was I? I was just like this chair of this thing. Well, guess what? That unconscious bias now is being done. All the governors at the Motion Picture Academy just had
Last year, they all went through unconscious bias. The Television Academy is now doing that for all their government. So I'm so happy that this is actually happening within the industry. 6 years later, but that's okay. We need to have those conversations. So that's one of the things that I've been doing. But, and then how would I, any advice for acting students of today? Chris and I were talking about this last night. And he was saying that some of the actors in his program feel like, you know, how can they really relate to these plays? I'm just gonna say written by white men. Well, let's just say Shakespeare, right? Or whoever, Moliere, or, and I said, well, wait a second, they're actors. I mean, for me, I would say you're an actor first. How do you interpret the human condition through this part? Through all your experience, no matter what color you are, what religion you are, I don't care. You're an actor first. So put that forth, and your particular spin is what makes it so interesting. Because my advice for acting students of today, the thing that's always kept me going is there's a lot of fantastic actors out there, but no one can say it like I say it. Because my experience is specific to me, and my interpretation of it is based on all of that. So I just say to people, your experience is you, fantastic, use that. And if you don't want to be doing those plays written by whoever that has nothing to do with your experience, then write your own. Write your own, create it, do that comedy act, do whatever it is, then create it that way and show us what it is. I guess that's it. Are we out of time?
That's fabulous advice, Jodi. It's wonderful advice. It's time to get going. Yes, my internet has been very unstable. I've been going in and out. I've only heard a little bit of what you just have been speaking, but thank you so much. Thank you to all.
I can't hear you.
Your time, and we appreciate that. Thank you to Jodi for giving of her time and sharing, you know, a great story with us. If Jodi,
I can't hear
my
you.
stream is going to be, I know you're going to put that information on the alumni webpage. You can't hear me?
No, yeah, you're still going in and out. But I will share
I don't know.
that.
My internet is failing me. I apologize.
Okay. I will share that somewhere on the alumni page whenever I get the final.
I'll help you, Jodi. We'll figure it out.
Right. A recording of tonight's session will be on the YouTube channel for the Purchase Alumni Association. And then on the Alumni Weekend calendar, there will be direct links to all the programs. We invite everyone to participate in tomorrow's night of reunion and Saturday's all alumni picnic. The registration links, if you haven't already signed up, are again on the Purchase Alumni webpage at purchase.edu/alumni weekend. Thank you to Chris and to Jodi for all of your expertise that you shared with us tonight and the wonderful video. And on behalf of the Office of Alumni Engagement, thank you all for your participation tonight.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank
Chris.
you.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Yep. Praise.
Bye.